Okay, so I have delineated the the podcast today with parts that I'm going to read and parts that Alex is going to read. I'm going to explain what informal public transportation is, and then Alex, I'm going to have you do the examples, which are fun.
And I will just say the word jitney repeatedly.
Yeah, you can just, I don't know. You're the bits guy on this podcast.
What is the first example? How do you say that?
Jeepney?
No, I know what a jeepney is. Is it Manila?
Oh, Manila.
Oh, it's Manila. Okay.
Like the file folder.
Okay. I've heard Manila, I just have never seen it spelled out. So.
Yeah. I was sort of indoctrinated into these things as a child, actually, because one of my best friends, his dad was from Manila, in the Philippines. So we got to hear all about jeepneys. He has a big model of one in their living room. It's quite fun.
Oh, holy, that's intense.
Phone.
Oh, let me make the text the manila color.
Great. Now it's completely unreadable.
You're welcome.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's not the worst thing I've seen.
Okay, everybody feel happy? Everybody ready to cast a pod?
I'd rather be broadcasting.
Me too.
Kyle, do you like fishing?
No.
Oh. Wow, I don't know. I'd never asked before, so. Okay, live in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to the internet, live from my apartment in fabulous Salt Lake City and a nuclear-proof bunker in an undisclosed location. This is the Red Line Podcast. I'm your host, quote, minibus enjoyer Dunstan, and these are my co-hosts.
Kyle, quote,
Late.
UTA on demand, close quote, Holland, and...
Alex, quote, I'm back after a one episode absence, unquote, Fielder. Today we're talking about informal public transportation services, the microscale private bus systems that make the world go round. We'll talk jitneys, jeepneys, minibuses, and more after the news.
Kai, you gotta make the news noise.
Oh yeah. Do.
Tri-Rail, Miami's main commuter service, is adding express trains. In an apparent bid to compete with Brightline for trips between West Palm Beach and downtown Miami, the regional rail agency is adding express trips along its alignment. Although the program looks set to be small for now with just one trip in the morning and another in the evening, it's a good start for a huge and important economic region. Go by train!
That's funny. Competition between the public and private sector.
I mean...
When are we going to have competition? When are we going to get a UTA 2.0?
You see, here's the thing.
Boy. Please don't balkanize the Utah.
No, if I had a lot of money, right, a lot of money, I would create a parallel system to UTA. But it would just fill in all the gaps that I think are stupid, right? Like a stupid everything south of 35th being useless, all that sort of thing.
You can just take over service south of West Valley.
And north of, I don't know, Point of the Mountain. Well, really north of Provo, let's be honest with ourselves.
Really, south of West Valley, continuing all the way to the southern border of the state.
Hey, be nice to UVX.
UVX competitor running not in the bus lane.
I don't know if it would be much slower, honestly. It's quite a fast road. But that's beside the point. This has been the news.
Do.
Oh, I should have brought water. That's okay. I'll just drink this half-drank soda on my desk.
I've got milk.
What are
next
you
to me.
doing? Here, I'll pour some water through my computer to you.
Milk in the podcasting room, Alex. I am shook.
Hey, there's always milk in this house. in this nuclear-proof bunker in the Logan metropolitan area.
We support our American dairy farmers, is what Alex is saying.
Whoa.
Buy government cheese.
Buy government cheese. Oh my goodness. Okay.
New catchphrase. Live in the pods. Buy the government cheese.
Buy galvanized square steel.
Oh, hey, and don't forget about those eco-friendly wood veneers.
Where the fuck did that come from? That's been floating around the past couple of weeks.
And maybe, I don't know, some steel expansion screws borrowed from your aunt. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all you need for a well-designed home in this day and age.
In this economy.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they actually allowed people to do that in New York City, it might solve a lot of problems and create a lot of new ones, but...
Such is life.
Okay, so, when Americans and people from what we like to call, and please be aware I'm putting this in scare quotes, the developed world, think about public transportation, we generally assume that it will be a large government operation, probably subsidized, either publicly owned or contracted out by the government. In other words, the TfL, the MTA, the TTC, and other such organizations. And basically every podunk city in the country has something like this, right?
I mean, with the way regulations are structured, what else are you going to do? Like, if the government isn't running the buses, how is a private bus company going to get bus stops installed efficiently on a public street?
Interesting.
Solution. They don't, in the case of Salt Lake Express.
Yeah, and herein lie many of the problems.
You know that there's an abandoned Greyhound stop at Provo?
Greyhound has stops.
There's a sign. You guys probably haven't spent as much time at Provo Central as I have, but there's a sign kind of
Nope.
in the south parking lot that just says Greyhound.
That's it.
Maybe I'll take you there next time we go to Provo.
Great. No, anyways, the way regulations and government spending are structured around here, it's not only financially unviable to make private local transit, it's also just logistically difficult. Like, where do you get stops? Where do you get whatever the hell else you need to run buses? You want to run a tram? Good luck getting permission to install tracks in the public street.
Oh gosh, return, please. Oy vey. All right. But, you know, in the developing world, this, and again, developing is in scare quotes, right? This isn't always the case. State resources are needed for other things, and cities often expand organically in ways that make them very difficult to serve with traditional fixed-route public transportation. This is where so-called informal transportation comes into play, and I have a lovely little document here written by the Institution for Advancing Public Transportation that says sort of a set of rules for where informal transport emerges. So, number 1, there is no service for some population because governments, civil servants, and the upper class do not notice this lack of supply, even if it is critical to the economy.
That's interesting, because here where we live, like even just in the microcosm that is the Salt Lake Valley, the places that lack public transportation the most are also the places that are least likely to want it. And the government tends to focus public transportation resources, as few as they may be, towards places that they think are more likely to use it.
Or need it.
Yeah. Whereas here it sounds like places that are very likely to need public transportation are being overlooked entirely.
Pretty much. Number 2, there is a lack of investment in public service and utilities, and the public realm and infrastructure are very much car-oriented, right? This is kind of the classic African city. You know, as it develops, they want to build roads for cars so that they can, you know, have a modern city and a modern a modern transportation system. But most people aren't using that, right?
Yeah. Cars being expensive and whatnot.
Number 3, there is fast urban sprawl and city development, kind of, completely uncontrolled in a way that we don't see even in places like Texas. In like really rapidly growing sub-Saharan African cities like Kinshasa, for example, like people will just like, clear cut forest or whatever to build a new part of town. And you can't plan for that, right? Because that's not how it works in a state with low government capacity.
Yeah, I'm assuming there's just not the same sort of regulatory infrastructure that like the U.S. has very carefully put in place over the decades to prevent anything from happening.
Well, and also, even if there was such a regulatory infrastructure, there would not be the capacity to actually enforce it, right? Number 6, there is a supply of vehicles that can be shared to transport people, and public transport is considered as a private business. Public transport is not centered on urban dwellers' needs or on public policy. It's just, it's a good way to make money, right? Capitalism.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially if the alternative is just walking.
Yeah.
Yeah. High demand, and I'm also going to assume that labor costs are quite a bit lower than they are here due to lack of labor laws.
Well, and a lot of what you see on these sort of routes is not like wouldn't be regulated by labor laws anyway, because it's just a guy like driving the minibus that he owns to pick people up. Maybe not even along like, necessarily a specified route.
And then as an owner-operator, you can consider your like income and your expenditure structure a lot differently than you would being an employee of one of these private companies.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here in like the U.S., that would probably be completely illegal because, I don't know, licenses or something.
Yeah, you have to have a CDL. So.
Yeah, and maybe a taxi license, maybe
a
other
taxi
stuff.
license, yeah.
I don't know. Like, Uber's slipped through the cracks a lot, but like...
But not for
long. The government
long.
is very keen on regulating these sorts of transportation services.
Well, and the government's also very keen on regulating Uber out of existence, as it should be.
You also have the higher regulations on emissions and vehicle safety.
Yeah.
Oh, true, which means more expensive vehicles.
Exactly, yeah.
Makes it a lot harder for, this sort of thing to emerge in the, once again, scare quotes, developed world. So these things, whatever you want to call them, jitneys, jeepneys, tuk-tuks, lots of other things, are often called share taxis in official literature. Informal public transportation often runs on semi-fixed routes set up either by the local government or a large company that owns a lot of minibuses, or what are called, I believe, jitney cartels, which is where you have a whole bunch of jitney drivers sort of coming together to sort of form an actual like system, right? Like with routes, and so people can know where the bus is going to run and when it's going to come. And the main thing is like, well, you just have all of these sort of owner operators running the whole thing and collecting the fares instead of a larger agency.
Yeah, so once the routes are drawn out, anybody can go get their van,
literally,
and go drive a route and make some money.
Literally, like you just go to the start of the route, you put a 5 on the front of your car, and you are suddenly, a bus.
This sounds like the operational benefits of taxis, the whole owner-operator concept, combined with the operational benefits of fixed-route buses.
It's also like the anarcho-capitalist, like, dreamscape. So, there are rarely fixed stops on these. You have to hail a jitney or a share taxi like you would hail a regular taxi to get them to stop. So, like, you just, sort of yeet yourself out into the street and start yelling at the guy with the 5 on the front of his car.
So maybe there are some nice things about having a monolithic transit agency.
Maybe. the fares are generally quite cheap, and the vans are often, sort of as a result of that, almost quite crowded. So you'll just have those Ford Transit vans. You'll have something like that, and it'll have like 40 people in it.
Well, that's how you keep fares down and how you keep costs down, like high utilization, cheap vehicles.
Yeah. And importantly, in many parts of the world, share taxis are the primary form of motorized transportation, period, exclamation mark. Even in Manila, the capital of the Philippines, which has seen massive improvements in formal public transit over the last few years, more than 9 million people ride on a share taxi every day. And one study estimated that over 90% of the transport supply available in parts of the developing world is made up of share taxis and other forms of informal public transportation.
That's incredible.
That's crazy. 90%.
Sort of a I don't know, not to be like, too much of a lib on here, but sort of like a proofing concept of market economies, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
somebody's going to do it, right? So,
Yeah.
Market economies do work for stuff like this in an environment where the regulations are structured in a way that encourage
or
them
the
to.
regulations do not exist, more likely.
Yeah, well, I phrased it that way because regulations not existing could result in stuff working great or stuff completely collapsing.
This is true.
For insert service.
This is true. I think it's also quite interesting how, all these kind of developing cities in Africa and other places are developing themselves in sort of a car-centric manner, and how that sort of lends itself to this sort of thing, right? Because suddenly you have all this new decent car infrastructure. It makes it a lot easier to enable something like this.
I was going to say, this seems like the perfect match for what government investment is happening. Like, you're maximizing the utilization you can get out of whatever public investment there is.
Yeah. So, to put it lightly, informal transit is a big deal, and it might have some important lessons to teach us. So Alex is going to provide us with a bunch of sort of fun examples from around the world. We might put up slides for this. I think that some of the images I have are good, so.
Yeah, hopefully, because I'm looking ahead and there's some pretty good images.
Yeah, they're fun.
Well, to start off with Manila, the file folder. As you mentioned, Manila is somewhat famous for the vast amount of informal public transportation available. Every day, more than 9 million people ride on a jeepney in a region of 13 million people.
So that's like what?
So,
like one trip per 9/13 of a person every day. That's
that's about 75%.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Oh. Well, actually roughly 46%. Is that right?
Yeah, it says roughly 46% of Manila commuters use jeepneys every day. And the reason it's 46 instead of 75, like you said, is because some people are taking more than one trip.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
like the rides it's usually phrased not per day but per year, like rides per capita per year.
Okay,
Might be
that
like
makes...
I don't know, 20 here, whereas it might be like a few hundred in Manila.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense then. Oh yeah, 46%.
They're different proxies for the same metric, essentially.
Yeah, that's insane. 46%.
And then there's also 20% using the I think they call it the LRT, even though I think it's a metro, and buses as well. So that's 66% of people just using public transit to get to work, and most of the rest are walking. Wild.
Hopefully,
I wonder what effect this has on emissions, especially after you account for presumably outdated high emissions vehicles. If you combine that with this huge mode share, is this low vehicle emissions per capita?
I would imagine low per capita, although probably still high overall, right? Because you stick, 400 people on a nasty diesel Amtrak train, you're still going to get way lower emissions per capita than everyone driving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think air quality is also just generally worse in industrializing countries.
This is true.
Again, lack of the regulation that we have here to make the air pollution go somewhere else. For example, said industrializing
For example,
countries.
Manila. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can use this picture of the jeepney, because there's a bus right behind it.
Yeah,
But-
it's fun,
That's
isn't it?
funny.
It has like a thing that says like, I can't read exactly what it says, but I want to say like Angelus God or something right here on the top of it. I don't know.
Like angels or God?
Angels
I
or
can't
God.
quite tell.
Yeah.
Like,
Like-
it's a pretty cool jeepney.
That's one heck of a way to sort of advertise your your bus is like, this is the Angels or God bus.
Based.
Yeah. These famous jeepneys, and jeepney is a portmanteau of the jeeps used as the basis for the vehicles, and then the term jitney. And they're iconic in the Philippines, and especially in the metro area of Manila.
Yeah, I mean, basically like I have this. I think I told this story before, but this is on air. I had this friend from when I was a lot younger who his dad was an immigrant from the Philippines, and he had like, of all things in his living room, just like this like scale model of a jeepney, like sitting there on the mantle. So like these things are important.
And
I
do we know exactly where the bases of the jeeps came from? Because I'm wondering if they're from a former war zone.
Yes. So
Okay.
the jeepneys, right? Like the jitneys developed pretty early in Manila. Like it's pretty much as soon as cars came in, everyone was like, wouldn't it be a good idea if we ran like a bus off of this? But then, after World War II, there's suddenly just like, 500,000 American Jeeps left behind in the Philippines because we finally let them have their independence. And so they're like, well, what's the sort of most convenient thing to make our jitneys out of now? Oh, there's, 500,000 Jeeps left here in the Philippines. Let's use those.
Huh. Well, I'm not surprised by that, but good for them for using them.
Ingenuity that excites.
Meanwhile, America has the Jeep truck.
Well, and if you look at the front of these things, they do kind of look like those World War II Jeep Willys, right? Like they have that kind of
Yeah.
silhouette. So
Yeah, I was wondering if they might be coming from Vietnam as well. But
they
maybe
might.
maybe those are still in Vietnam and they're doing their own services.
Well, one of the kind of interesting things about the Vietnamese military is that they don't ever throw anything out. So if you look at the Vietnamese military today, like there's just still like a bunch of like, 1970s American equipment that they just use in regular service. It's quite interesting.
Well, moving on to the next example, we have Eastern Europe. Oh, you might need to pronounce this word.
I believe it's Marshrutka. Marshrutka, yeah.
Marshuka. Or routed taxicabs, as the translation is, have become common in Eastern Europe following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the subsequent cuts to public infrastructure funding. Basically, they fill the gaps left by the now aging Soviet public transportation systems.
Wasn't this after the Soviets turned towards electric trolley buses due to lack of industrial capacity to produce gas engines?
Yes, that is correct. The thing about
This is kind of a funny slide.
public transportation is that, well, look, the Soviet Union was pretty good at it, but it really liked to build like just kind of expensive to maintain core routes. Like you would have like a trolley bus out to Podunk Jimmy John Village or whatever with like a bus that ran twice a day, but you have all the trolley infrastructure for that. and you can't run anything else other than the trolley over that or than the tram over that. And, even though it's super expensive to maintain in a market economy. And so, as the Soviet Union falls and suddenly all these places are entering kind of an economic crisis almost, they don't have the money to maintain that anymore. Services start getting cut. And everyone's like, well, time to, make a marshrutka instead. And we're going to have our little marshrutka company that fills in all the gaps left by the retraction of public services.
Well, hopefully we can use this picture because it shows the trolley bus wires above the marshrutka, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, and go on.
Yeah, many of these have become so busy that they actually rely on small buses instead of the traditional vans, which I guess is just a testament to how useful they are and how popular they are.
I do quite like this little bus that we have here, though. I like that it has 2 doors, even though it's 10 feet long?
It's the size of a F-250.
Yeah. So very European in its own way, isn't it?
The flat front especially.
Yeah.
Well, our next example is Africa in general. Informal transit goes by a number of names in Africa, such as Jabaka, hopefully I'm saying that right as well, which is in Ghana, or, you might have to take a crack at these. Matatu in Kenya. These routes are very popular, especially in places where the government investment in infrastructure is necessarily limited. In some cities, over 70% of commuters use shared taxis to get to work, which, again, 70%, that's pretty wild.
It is extremely wild. And I should mention that, Africa is kind of the king of these things at this point because of sort of the, I guess you would call it, politico-economic cultural situation where you have all of these states, right? But none of these states have any ability to do anything because a lot of reasons, including the resource trap, other such things. But this means that sort of a lot of services that we would normally hope to be provided by the government are sort of left to be provided by public or private individuals instead.
Yeah. Well, it seems like they really like customizing the vans.
They do. Isn't it great? I love these little, this one has
so pretty.
guys on front of it. The other one says Rick Ross Lamborghini. I don't think that's a Lamborghini, but
it might as well be.
Yeah, I also...
Dude, all we get here is ad wraps for hard lemonade.
There's no dots on these things. That's one of the...
Yeah, screw dots.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about a lot of these kind of share taxis in Africa, apparently their owners will play extremely loud music of a certain type in hopes of attracting customers.
Like an ice cream truck?
Yeah, kind of like an ice cream truck, which is not something you would think of, but when you hear about it, it makes a lot of sense.
Huh. Well, I guess if one guy plays classical and the other plays hard rock, you can kind of know what line is coming up.
Yeah, I want the girl in red marshrutka. Kyle wants the Chopin marshrutka, the one that plays exclusively classical music. Yeah.
We should pitch this idea to UTA.
Yeah, make sure it plays extra loud going through the avenues.
What do you think that the 209 theme song would be?
I think it should be Neil Young's Rocking in the Free World.
Or maybe, I don't know, Ain't No Mountain High Enough because of all the hills it has to go up.
True.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And then, I don't know, the 217 could be Highway to Hell or something. I don't know.
The 473 can have like the Mario music that plays when you go over the like the speed bumps in Mario Kart.
We should definitely pitch this.
Oh, I think
this
UTA
is
would
pretty
go for this.
promising.
Yeah, so hard. Like, no noise regulations or anything will be broken by this.
No, definitely
I
not.
mean, you've heard the like farting cars, so
This is true.
Or like the cat cars that meow.
I have not heard this.
Okay,
You should look it up.
send us a video or something because I really want to see this now.
Okay.
Uh,
Well,
Okay.
anyway, the next example, this might be pretty surprising, is actually New York City.
wow.
What?
The city that never
New York
sleeps.
City, the
What?
city that
The-
never
the Big
sleeps,
Pear.
the Big Apple, the Big Pear.
The city that wakes up at 3 a.m. The city of glass.
The city of 24/7 subway service and more bus routes than so many bus routes that they have to have a different designation for each borough. Yeah.
The capital of the United Kingdom.
New York City.
Why not?
NYC.
The capital of the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
Okay.
New York Jitney.
Yeah. So, I'm going to tell a story here. So, in the I believe it was 1980, there was a big transit strike in New York, right? So, suddenly, in the city that never sleeps, everyone is forced to continue sleeping because they can't get to work because the subway's down and all the buses are down. And there's no way everyone's driving to work because traffic is already insane even with all that. So, how are we going to get to work?
I think that would be physically impossible.
Yes, it actually would be. Unless you built like, I don't know, a Katy freeway for every like block of Manhattan. The job
Well, then there would be no Manhattan left, so
the trouble is that the job density of Midtown and like downtown are just so extreme that there's just no physical way to get that many people there in cars. But that's sort of beside the point. So what starts happening is people like, basically do the equivalent of what I said earlier and slap a number 5 on their car and like start picking people up for dollars.
they go run their favorite bus route.
Yeah, go run their favorite bus route or just, are like, hey, you going downtown? Yeah. All right, get in. I'll charge you $1, right? And this is the beginning of New York City's dollar vans, and they've kind of expanded since then. You can get a license for one now, but there's still a whole bunch of unlicensed ones. And they kind of fill...
Oi, you got a license for that, mate?
Yeah. No, I do not. And these kind of fill in a lot of the gaps between the city's public transit, right? Because, there are a lot of parts of New York that are just extraordinarily well served by public transit. But there's also some like weird gaps in like Queens and the Bronx and things like that. And so people will form these little bus routes and, make it a way to get around your neighborhood or between all the Chinatowns or whatever. There's a whole bunch of these that will run just between the city's like 5 or 6 different Chinatowns. Just so that people can stay connected. So it's quite remarkable, actually. You can still get on these. They're still normally $1. New York dollar van's quite famous. So
That's impressive that they're still $1, because $1 in 1980 was a hell of a lot more than it is now.
yeah. Yes, it is. And actually, jitneys used to be fairly common in the U.S. as well, although it's not something that's talked about a lot. Apparently there were jitneys in San Francisco until 2016, which, how are you going to know that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, moving on from New York City, we have another U.S. city, which is Atlantic City.
Is that one in Jersey?
Yeah, it's in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's in Jersey.
It's like if Las Vegas was in a state of post-industrial decline.
Cool.
That's the
that
best way
painted a much more detailed picture in my head than I thought it would.
and it's on the ocean, so at a beach to that picture.
Damn.
It's like Atlantic City is weird because like it's a strip of like hyper expensive, huge casino developments along the ocean, and then a block inland from that is Detroit. So it's a weird place.
Yeah.
But
Detroit now or Detroit 10 years ago?
Detroit 20 years ago.
Okay. Continue.
So
Yep. Well, Atlantic City, for whatever reason, I guess, has privately operated minibuses connecting the city to the railway stations. I assume this is kind of for gamblers.
I think so.
They allegedly run 24/7.
Yeah, my 24/7. Yeah, because I think NJT's service to Atlantic City is not entirely satisfactory regarding like tourist purposes. So the idea is to sort of fill those gaps with the Jitney.
It's a perfectly good idea.
I do like the livery on this. It's like just fluorescent green.
It's to catch the old gambler's eyes. And whatever cost it's gonna be, it's a lot less of a gamble because it'll actually get you there.
They should make that their slogan, like Atlantic City Jitney. Not a gamble. I don't know, something like that.
Unlike
the best bet you'll make.
The best bet you've ever made. Yeah. There you go.
That's great.
So yeah, those are some examples of jitneys, and obviously these kind of exist all around the world. Like there's a very extensive system in Mexico City, for example. A lot of the kind of famous BRT routes in Latin America, like the Transmilenio in Bogota, are actually kind of operated like jitneys, where the government built all the infrastructure, but then just a whole bunch of private operators run the buses over it. So it's a remarkably important and widely used way of getting around the world, and I'm just curious, like, what we're all thinking this could be applied to in our own situation.
I mean, I think it's interesting that this has emerged as like the lowest cost and most useful transit in like a low investment by the government scenario in infrastructure.
Basically in like half of the world.
Yeah, like I feel like this could be like the default transit solution in places where, I don't know, a fully grade separated metro or even however the hell much light rail costs these days is deemed financially infeasible or unjustified by lack of ridership projections or whatever the hell the excuse is.
Well, right.
Like,
Yeah,
why doesn't every
I
town
definitely-
of 100,000 people have a jitney system?
I definitely see this having an application for colleges. Especially, like Utah State, if there was a way for people to actually, like, announce that they were going down to the Wasatch Front and be able to give rides to more people, that would be a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah, very chicken and the egg, though, and very intertwined with modern technology, because, like, if such a system already existed, then you would have no such concern, and it would probably be self-perpetuating. And if somebody wanted to create such a system in 2024 instead of the 80s, it would probably just be an app, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it probably would be an app. But I definitely see a lot of potential, especially for smaller towns, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder if the main issue doing this in, for example, the US, because we live here and we know lots of things about it, is like profitability. Because here we've got very strict regulations on motor vehicles and very strict regulations on the operation of commercial-sized motor vehicles and all sorts of things like that. So I'd imagine it would be a lot more difficult to, say, have a jitney system that runs actual minibuses that pay for themselves from, say, Logan to Salt Lake, as opposed to just, people ride-sharing in their minivan.
Yeah.
Like, if that was more profitable out of the box, it would emerge sooner and at a larger scale.
Yeah.
I was going to say, most of these jitney systems seem born out of lack of regulation.
This
and
is
that
true.
seems to be what keeps them going at full steam.
You see, and here's
keeps costs down, most importantly.
Here's the interesting thing to me is like there is that lack of regulation, but also there is demand, sort of latent demand that is recognized to be there. And because of that, sort of deregulation or unregulation, that demand is able to be met. And I'm like, I don't know, it's a little concerning, I guess, to me from an economics standpoint that we're unable to have something like that in this country where there is clearly a very large latent demand for public transportation, but there's no way for a private company to fulfill it because we've made the regulations sort of quite onerous to start anything like that.
Yeah, like, here the barrier to entry isn't a shitty old Jeep that's been somehow transformed into a minibus and some spare time and a sticker that says number 5. Here, the barrier to entry is literally millions of dollars to start, like, a small bus company.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that should be, like, I don't know. It's just something to think about. One other sort of notable example of sort of almost a jitney service, I don't know, of a group stepping in where the government can't do it, is the Unitrans, or the University of California at Davis's public transportation system, which is run and operated entirely by the associated students of the University of California, Davis.
Not even by the actual university, just by the students.
Yeah, it's run by the student organization, I believe.
That's amazing.
I believe with some funding from the university and the city, obviously, at this point. But in the beginning, it was it was a student thing. And it carries 16,000 people on a weekday.
Oh, that's quite good. Yeah.
And all of its drivers are students who work for it part-time, which is like...
That's so base.
Maybe a way to sort of bring the cost down of labor.
I mean, but not in the worst way possible. Like, from what I understand it, our university just hires whoever is willing to work for a comically low wage.
This is
not
true.
Not necessarily students specifically.
Yeah. I can confirm that as someone who did work for a comically poor wage.
And funnily enough, in the early days of Unitrans, they used double-decker London City buses.
Where did they get
I've
those?
just sent you a picture. They had them shipped over.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking
hilarious.
Those would be great in some of the other places we've talked about.
Right?
Oh, that is so cool.
Like a classic kind of double-decker London City bus would be great on like a minibus route, because you can just pack a whole bunch of people in there. So
wow. Do they still run those?
I
or no?
think that they have moved to modern vehicles, including some articulated vehicles.
Womp
And
womp.
Modern double-decker buses. Look at this. Isn't it great? Like, this is in UC Davis. This is in Davis, California, of all places.
Okay, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. So anyway...
Well, when you said Unitrans, I thought it was a transit service for Unitarians.
Unitransian, yeah.
Unified Transit Authority.
Yeah.
Next to Unified Fire Department.
Inshallah. So, anyway, I have no other thoughts on this, but I do think we should sort of re-examine the political economy we've developed, where it's very difficult for private operators to sort of sustainably fill transportation needs.
Yeah, you've been getting me thinking about that even more and more as we're talking, because I think it's not just like the absolute cost of both starting up and then operating a transportation service like this. It's also the relative cost of that to private car ownership at large. Like,
right.
Here in the U.S., we've done everything we can to make private car ownership very low barrier and very easy for anybody to achieve. Like, we hand out licenses like candies.
We give out expensive car loans like candy.
Yeah. Like, car loans are some of the most accessible financing for any object you could own in the country, which is kind of insane, given the liability that the vehicles themselves are. Like... maybe it needs to be more difficult to have private cars and easier to start your own jitney service. Like, maybe it should be easier to get commercial loans for these vehicles. Maybe CDL training for people who aren't being employed directly by a transit agency should be more accessible. Stuff like that. Like, I don't think we're ever going to bring down the startup and operation costs of a jitney service to a level that would make them just instantly economically feasible, just because of, safety and labor regulations. But we could change that relative balance.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also think trust is a big problem, especially recently within the past probably 10 years, to be honest, where a lot of people just wouldn't get in a car with other people, especially if it's I don't want to say unregulated, but it's not associated with a specific reputable company.
This is true. There is a sort of level of social paranoia in this country, even though relative to the places we've been talking about, it's way safer in every way. Everyone here is just super afraid of each other for no reason all the time.
The pods and the bubbles. I have conflicting feelings about this because as a transit user, no, I don't want to get into a poorly marked, rundown minivan that's part of a jitney service when I'm used to getting on buses.
Well, to be fair, we did that to get on the 107 to Park City,
Yeah. Okay, anyways. When I'm used to getting on, $500,000 buses run by uniformed members of the Utah Transit Authority. I don't want to do that as an individual, but at the broader level, if Uber can get people to get into cars with just fucking whoever, why can't a jitney service do that too?
Well, and this isn't for your stupid, suburbanite who has a choice in this sort of thing. This is for
No, it's not.
Jim Bob McGee who has to bike 10 miles to work from South Valley because there's no freaking bus, right?
True.
Yeah, that is a good point.
And would benefit greatly from having a way to get to tracks that doesn't involve walking 10 miles on a suburban arterial, I guess.
God, it's so bad out there. And then once you're on tracks, then you have to, wait for the transfer and do all the tracks and then walk to your destination.
There's a lot to it. It would be interesting to see someone try and start one nowadays. And I feel like you could work out a lot of the issues. Or at least identify them.
I mean, God knows I've thought about buying a stupid UTX transit van or something and slapping a logo that says Ogden Logan Express on it and just, running 10 trips a day between Ogden Central and the Logan Transit Center. I feel like that should be something that should be able to exist.
I mean, with enough willpower, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the main indicator that that's unlikely to happen anytime soon is what our current private bus companies are doing. The companies, not just Salt Lake Express, but the many smaller ones that just own and operate charter buses and stuff like that. Those companies are, by and large, not operating bus routes for local transportation. Salt Lake Express is targeting very, very select profitable routes. The costs of owning and operating buses or even minibuses here is just so damn high that it's a barrier to operating local routes.
Yeah. If we're also just having operator shortages in general, we're not going to have people who are going to want to work for themselves unlicensed and with no benefits when they could be working for a transportation agency directly.
Yeah. You do make a good point there, because if one way to kind of bypass this cost barrier is making it more practical for people to be owner-operators of their own one bus LLC bus company. Because if you have the willpower and the free time and the savings banked up to run, say, this Logan Salt Lake route because you want to, then nobody's going to stop you. Like, Salt Lake Express is only going to run explicitly profitable routes. You could donate time to run a Logan Salt Lake route in the hope that it will eventually turn a profit. But without a way for there to be owner-operators of these services, that's never going to happen.
So, all of that being said, yeah, a very interesting topic, and very I don't know, antithetical to the way we always tend to think about these sort of things here most of the time. So, I don't know, give us your thoughts in the comments, and please remember to like and subscribe and to follow and leave us a rating on iTunes and Spotify. If you like what we do here, please consider becoming a member on Patreon. Patrons receive early access to all of our content, as well as exclusive episodes and occasional merch drops. Speaking of patrons, I don't know, I guess I'm just going to do regular tiers because Jitneys are Jitneys. At Super Duper Frontrunner tier, $69.69 a month, we have Zach Adams. At Super Frontrunner tier, we have Generic GT at $25 a month. At regular Frontrunner tier, we have Curtis Herring, Devin Zander, McKay Ransom, Mike Christensen, Phobos2390, and Tony Stunts.
At the Redline tier, or the Jitney with music that indicates the route tier, $5 a month, we have Brian Smith, Christopher Whaley, DJ
Hi, Will.
Watkins, Elijah Kensler, G4, Jacob Whitecotton, Jesse Mayo, Reluctant LA Resident, Robert P. Walsh, and that's that.
At Blue Line with Jitneys as feeders instead of the buses because those got cut tier, $3 a month, we have Alex Dykelski, Alice MYOB, Ben Busath, Bradley Bondi, Ethan McDonald, Evelyn, Gavin Grotegut, Gonzo12, and Jack McCoskey.
At Green Line
tier. And Martine Hecker Martinez.
Oops, skipped one.
And
You
Oliver.
still have
And Sam
Myers.
And
Sky
Sky
Lukowski.
Lukowski. And finally,
Zach
for real this time, Zach Verstott.
Yeah.
I'm blind.
At Green Line tier, $1 a month, we have Benjamin
When it's
Wood,
not derailing.
Joshua S. Horvat, and Kapil. Thanks for listening.
Thank you all.
Be excited because our first real video is coming out soon, trademark.
Real.
Probably by the time this episode comes
Most
out.
likely.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Go bankrupt trying to start a jitney company in America.
Yeah, or don't go bankrupt because some people are doing it without going bankrupt.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, not going bankrupt is pretty alright.
So true, bestie.
Now,
Signed, Alex, 2024.
now go watch that cat video.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. What the hell? I really don't like how, erect its tail is. It's, just kind of sticking up there with a Swedish flag on it. What the heck is going on there?
Yeah, I don't know what the Swedish flag is supposed to symbolize on that.
I don't know,
I don't know if that's a jab at anything, but...
Or maybe it's just, this guy is Swedish, because the church in the background looks kind of Swedish Lutheran, so...
And the lights underneath it.
Yeah.
I don't know why there's so much smoke behind it when it takes off, too.
Maybe because it's a cold day and
But-
a rainy day. I mean, that happens a lot more
Maybe.
sometimes. Oh, that's so
But
bizarre.
Think about it in terms of jitney, because you could have the cat dog, the cat line, the dog line, the hamster line.
Well, and,
Oh, I think you're onto something.
Think about how many more people, your cat jitney will attract versus, the classic rock jitney. This is going to do so much better.
True.
But especially if you dress it up like the animal. Imagine hopping in the cow jitney, and it's just mooing down the street.
Oh, good heavens. Somebody needs to let these gentlemen in the Democratic Republic of the Congo cook.